So Steve Bannon is on his way to prison. A judge has ordered that he start his 4-month prison sentence on July 1st. So let's stop and think about this one for a minute. July 1st, Steve Bannon goes to prison. July 11th, Donald Trump gets sentenced. And then July 15th, the Republican National Convention starts. So July is not going to be a good month for MAGA, although I'm sure they will find a way to go out there at the Republican National Convention and celebrate. They'll find a way to cry and say that they're the victims in the story. And I'm sure they will sit there and call themselves patriots and talk about how everyone is out to get them. It's going to be pretty nauseating to watch, but either way you slice it, July is not going to be a good month for MAGA. And the funny part about this is this could have all been avoided for Steve Bannon, but he was convicted at trial after refusing to appear before the January 6th committee. And it's funny to me because Trump says, only criminals take the fifth, only the mob pleads the fifth. Bannon could have showed up and did that. He chose not to do that either. He just completely no-showed it. He was convicted, and then he appealed that conviction, which got rejected. But what's interesting is he appealed on these two grounds. I'm reading here from Midas Touch. Number one, that the J6th was not a lawfully formed committee with subpoena power since Speaker Pelosi refused to accept 2 of the 5 nominees advanced by Kevin McCarthy. Pelosi refused to seat Jim Jordan and Jim Banks since they were directly involved in Trump's efforts to overturn the election. McCarthy then pulled all 5 members of the committee, and Pelosi named Republicans Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger to the committee in their place. Both gave up their seats in Congress due to MAGA's ire over their service on the committee. And number 2, that Trump asserted executive privilege, leaving Bannon no choice but to refuse to testify. This claim was even more ridiculous than the first. Bannon served only 7 months in the Trump administration before being fired for repeatedly clashing with Trump staffers. His feud with Jared Kushner was likely the primary reason why Trump got rid of him, firing him by tweet, calling him Sloppy Steve. So the reason that the January 6th committee wanted to speak with Steve Bannon is because comments he made before and after the election indicated that he was directly involved in plots to overturn the election, or he was talking to people that were. And so if the truth is truly on this guy's side, then you would think he would want to show up. I mean, even if he does think that it's a group of thugs, even if he does think it's all bullshit, if the truth's on his side, he could show up and at least say that. But he didn't. And now here he is outside crying about how he's the victim and how no matter what happens, he's never going to shut up. Take a look at this.
Great lawyers, and we're going to go all the way to the Supreme Court if we have to, but I want to say something specifically about the Justice Department. Merrick Garland, Lisa Monaco, the entire Justice Department, they're not going to shut up Trump. They're not going to shut up Navarro. They're not going to shut up Bannon, and they're certainly not going to shut up MAGA. If you look right here, you reporters, in the 2.5 or 3 years we've been here, look at the rise of MAGA, look at the rise of Donald Trump. If the election was held today, according to Harry Enton over at CNN, President Trump would win in a landslide. All of this, besides the major legal issues that have to be addressed, all of this is about one thing. This is about shutting down the MAGA movement, shutting down grassroots conservatives, shutting down President Trump. Not only are we winning, we are going to prevail, and every number and every poll shows that. There's nothing that can shut me up and nothing that will shut me up. There's not a prison built or a jail built that will ever shut me up. All victory to MAGA. We're going to win this. We're going to win at the Supreme Court. And more importantly, we're going to win on November 5th in an amazing landslide with the Senate, the House, and also Donald J. Trump back as President of the United States. Thank you very much.
Lock him up! Lock them up! You're a coup plotter! It's a failed coup!
So even though Trump one time referred to Steve Bannon as Sloppy Steve, he still took to Truth Social to post this. And before I read it, I just got to say this, folks. Look at this post when I put it up on the screen. If this guy was your friend on Facebook and you saw this post, you would keep scrolling. You wouldn't hit see more. If you saw someone typing like this in all caps, ranting and raving about whatever, you would say, I don't give a shit, and you would keep scrolling. But yet this guy has a cult following that tunes in every day to read this bullshit. Take a look at it. It is a total and complete American tragedy that the crooked Joe Biden Department of Injustice is so desperate to jail Steve Bannon and every other Republican for that matter for not submitting to the unselect committee of political thugs made up of all Democrats and 2 crazed former Republican lunatics crying Adam Kinzinger and Liz out of her mind Cheney. It has been irrefutably proven that it was the unselects who committed actual crimes when they deleted and destroyed all material evidence in a pathetic attempt to protect crazy Nancy Pelosi and other Democrats from the truth, that I did absolutely nothing wrong. The un-American weaponization of our law enforcement has reached levels of illegality never thought possible before. Indict the unselect J6 committee for illegally deleting and destroying all of their findings. MAGA 2024. And of course, Marjorie Taylor Greene, being a regular on Steve Bannon's podcast, she had to chime in with this bullshit. Steve Bannon is being sent to prison July 1st for a bogus contempt of Congress charge from Nancy Pelosi's fake January 6th committee that was set up against House rules. I have been begging, pleading, and practically yelling at my Republican House colleagues and our Speaker to do something to stop the weaponized government. I swear Democrats would gun down patriotic Americans in the streets, and Republicans would just write a strongly worded letter condemning it. It makes me sick. Democrats have turned our federal government into everything our founding fathers warned us about, and our constitutional conservatives just keep powdering their wigs. You know, folks, this is something we've never seen before in American history. There has never been a group of people who have become convicted felons, who have been sentenced to prison, and they have such a large platform to say whatever they want to say, and they have control over an American political party. If you think back on any trial that we've ever had in history, go back to Al Capone. He didn't have this type of platform. Al Capone didn't have a podcast that he could run to and mouth off at and say whatever he wanted to say. Charles Manson didn't have this kind of platform that he could sit down and build on every day. O.J. Simpson didn't have complete control over an American political party, but this is the first time in history that something like this has happened. These people are being held accountable for their crimes, and yet they've got control over a political party, and they're running for the presidency again. They're looking to seek power again. They've written out Project 2025, laying out exactly what they want to do if reelected. This is something that we've never seen before. And they're sitting back crying that this is the weaponization against them, when in reality, they're being held accountable. And they're being held accountable by a group of people. Meanwhile, we used to have a two-party system. We used to have Republicans and Democrats, and every once in a while they would come together for the greater good, but they're not this go-around. This go-around, MAGA has infiltrated the Republican Party. They've took it over. There's not enough reasonable Republicans out there to call this out and stop this madness. So they can always turn it around and say, well, it's the Democrats. The Democrats are weaponizing it against us. And they have been working on this. They've been laying the foundation for this for years. Years ago, this stuff was just out there. These conspiracy theories were out there, and you had this small underground base of people that listened to it and bought it, but they weren't taken seriously. Like I said earlier, if you saw people ranting about conspiracy theories on Facebook or social media in all caps, you just keep going. You tell them they had a tinfoil hat, and that would be the end of it. But we've reached a point where they've taken over a political party, and they make the people who are pulling for them feel like that they are fighting for them. That's what's really happened here at the end of the day. They've got people brainwashed into believing that their fight is somehow for them. They have people invested in their story. And so the people are so invested in the story that they can't bring themselves to throw them under the bus. They can't bring themselves to hold them accountable, because if they did, they would have to hold themselves accountable. They would have to take back every bogus bullshit conspiracy theory that they tried to push. And so we've never seen anything like this before, and likely never will again. And if these type of people gets control of our government again, can you imagine what we're in for? Can you imagine going back to that clip of Steve Bannon and his just hatred that he's just spewing into the microphone? Can you imagine if people like that have the reins of power back? If Donald Trump wins in November, it's going to empower the Steve Bannons of the world. It's going to empower the Marjorie Taylor Greenes of the world even more. It's going to empower Mike Johnson. It's going to empower all of them to say, see, we were right all along. Everything that we've fought for so far, everything we've stood against is going to go right down the toilet unless you get out and vote on the side of democracy. And on the side of democracy is Joe Biden. There's never been a more clear-cut choice. It's never been easier to me. I truly don't understand the folks who are undecided. I don't understand the people who are still in the middle. I don't understand the people who are still on the fence. Anyone on the middle or still on the fence at this point, in my mind, you're either not paying attention or you just don't care. I don't see how that people can look at this and say both sides are the same. I don't see how people can look at this and say, well, it doesn't matter. It does matter. These hateful, cruel people, these spiteful, vindictive people are trying to regain power. They want it back. And do you think they're ever going to let go of it if they get it again? That's the question I ask myself every day. Would these people ever concede an election? Would they ever say, oh, you guys got me. You guys won. We're going to do better next time. No, they've abandoned that. There is no more a politician coming out and saying, hey, I ran a good race, ran a good campaign. I concede. I wish my opponent luck. Congratulations on his victory. I'm going to be there to help him. I'm going to be there to make this country better. They're not ever going to do that. That moment is never coming. If you're waiting for the moment where they make peace with us, it's not happening. I know so many people in my lifetime who have had family members or friends that they had fallen outs with, and they would feud and go back and forth with, and they would sit and hope for that day when they could reconcile. Well, you might be able to reconcile with your uncle over something that happens. You might be able to reconcile with an old friend or an old bandmate. You're not going to be able to reconcile with the Steve Bannons of the world because they're coming for revenge and they're coming for retribution. They're being held accountable. They're cornered and they're in panic mode. And I just feel like it's a very dangerous time. I really do, because there's people sitting back right now getting so invested in this that they're going to be willing to go out there and do whatever they say. And if Donald Trump loses, he can take the gloves off, say whatever he wants to say. And do you really think that his base would be reasonable? Do you really think that his base would say, oh, no, we're not going to go that far? I think they would do whatever he says. And that's the part that should have everyone out there concerned.